It's a great question. Sadly, as we lose survivors and people that witnessed the Holocaust firsthand, we're of course losing a very important source. There are still ways of getting that. We live in an era of video, an era of testimony which has been recorded. That's very fortunate, but of course it's not the same. It doesn't have the complexity. We can't ask the person to expand on a particular point, obviously, with a video. So that's a reality that any historian of any period has to face. But what's interesting for me is also the way that we can step back from that and see that Holocaust studies has changed in the last 20 years. In some senses, it's very much the way that Weimar Germany has changed. In the 70s and 80s, you had a large group of Weimar historians that were doing all the social history and labor history and political history, and you weren't having that many people working on the Nazi era. But as the 80s came around, many of those Weimar historians became Nazi-era historians, or we started seeing more dissertations done from the Nazi period. So we saw a kind of generational shift. At that same time, Weimar history became much more present in cultural studies. So Weimar began to show up in not only German studies, where it always was at home, but also in art history, in other literature, in film studies. And so in some ways it was natural, because as the Weimar generation was dying out, we got into questions that had much more to do with the representation of the Weimar generation. And it seems to me we're having a similar issue now in Holocaust studies. That certainly Holocaust studies is firmly based in history as a discipline, but increasingly, of course, the questions of memory, the questions of representation, the post-war questions about how the Holocaust history is mediated, these are becoming really central to our field. And that's certainly in art history spurring a greater interest in things like photography, but also in things like testimony and video and performance and memory in a way that we just didn't see 10 years ago. So I think that what we see is a kind of transference, or an expansion, shall we say, from history as a core to other fields where memory and representation are much more important topics.